Play this piano, and I will pay for your daughter's wedding.
If those are the sounds you call music, maybe you should stick to parking cars. The pianist's words cut through the hotel like a knife. An elderly valet stood frozen, car keys in hand. Phones turned. Guests whispered. And then the old man said two words. All right. What happened next destroyed the pianist's career and made a 68-year-old immigrant valet a viral legend. Seat back, grab your popcorn, and ride alone with me. Alexander Vaughn lived for applause. He liked the way people fell silent when his fingers touched ivory, the way champagne glasses paused mid-air when he played. But that Saturday evening at the Grand Meridian Hotel in Manhattan, something disrupted his rhythm. As he arrived early to prepare for his performance at a high-society wedding reception, he heard humming. Soft, melodic humming coming from near the valet stand. He stopped walking, his polished Italian shoes clicking once more before going silent on the marble floor. The lobby stretched vast and elegant around him, crystal chandeliers casting warm light on cream-colored walls adorned with gold trim. The scent of expensive floral arrangements mixed with furniture polish. A few early-arriving wedding guests lingered near the entrance, their designer gowns and tailored suits catching the evening light filtering through tall windows. The humming continued. Alexander turned his head toward the sound. Near the revolving doors, an elderly valet in a burgundy uniform stood organizing keys on a brass hook board. The man hummed quietly while working, a simple melody that carried an unfamiliar but hauntingly beautiful quality. His movements were slow, methodical, unbothered by the grandeur surrounding him. Alexander frowned. The melody irritated him for reasons he couldn't immediately name. Perhaps because it was unpolished, untrained, coming from someone who clearly had no formal understanding of music. Perhaps because a few guests had paused to listen, their attention was stolen by simple humming when his grand performance was minutes away. He approached the valet stand, his long black coat flowing behind him. His agent followed a step behind, carrying his leather portfolio of sheet music. The humming stopped as Alexander reached the desk. The elderly man looked up, his dark eyes polite but distant, the kind of look that said he'd seen thousands of guests, and Alexander was simply one more. "Excuse me," Alexander said, his voice carrying the precise diction of someone who'd performed at Carnegie Hall. "That humming? What was that supposed to be?" The old man blinked, confused. "Just a song, sir, from my childhood." "It was off-key," Alexander said. A guest nearby glanced over. Alexander's voice rose slightly, enjoying the attention. "If you're going to hum in a place like this, at least hum something recognizable. Something with actual musical structure." The valet's expression remained neutral. "My apologies, sir. I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "You didn't disturb me," Alexander said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I'm simply suggesting that some people should recognize their limitations. Music isn't for everyone." A small group of wedding guests drifted closer, sensing tension. One whispered to another. A phone discreetly angled toward the conversation. The elderly valet said nothing, just nodded slightly and turned back to his keyboard, his weathered hands moving to reorganize the brass hooks. That quiet dismissal sparked something in Alexander. He wasn't used to being ignored. "You know what?" His voice carried across the lobby now. Several more heads turned. "Since you seem to think you understand music, why don't you demonstrate?" The valet turned back slowly. "Sir?" Alexander gestured toward the lobby's centerpiece, a magnificent Steinway grand piano positioned near the windows, its black lacquer surface reflecting the chandelier light above. The instrument sat on a raised platform, waiting for his performance in 30 minutes. "That piano cost more than you'll make in 5 years. Play something. Anything. Let's see if your humming translates to actual skill." The lobby grew quieter. More guests gathered, forming a loose circle. The elderly man looked at the piano, then back at Alexander. "I'm working, sir. I need to—" "I'll make it interesting," Alexander interrupted, his showmanship taking over. He was aware of phones now, recording, and he leaned into it. If you can play anything on that piano that doesn't embarrass yourself, anything remotely competent, I'll personally pay for your daughter's wedding. I saw the photo on your key desk. Looks like she could use a proper celebration. Gasps rippled through the small crowd. Someone whispered, "Did he just offer to pay for a wedding?" Another voice said, "This is insane." The valet's face shifted slightly. Not anger, but something deeper. He glanced at the small photo tucked into the corner of his workstation, a picture of a young woman in casual clothes, smiling. His daughter. He looked back at Alexander, studying him with an expression that was hard to read. "You're serious?" the old man asked quietly. "Completely," Alexander said, spreading his arms wide. "Unless you'd rather admit that humming is the extent of your musical ability." The crowd waited. The hotel's ambient music seemed to fade. The valet stood still for a long moment, his calloused hands resting on the desk. Then, with a small exhale, he nodded. "All right." Alexander smiled, the kind of smile that expected victory. "Wonderful. Let's see what you've got. If you are enjoying this story, we had love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to us, and it helps us bring you even more intriguing stories. Now let's continue." The elderly man untied his valet apron slowly, folding it with care and placing it on the desk. He walked toward the piano with measured steps, his posture slightly bent from years of standing and service. The crowd parted, guests whispering, phones angling for better views. Alexander stood to the side, arms crossed, his expression a mixture of amusement and condescension. The valet reached the platform and paused at the piano's edge. His weathered fingers touched the fallboard gently, almost reverently. He lifted it, revealing the pristine ivory and ebony keys beneath. The hotel lobby held its breath. Someone in the back coughed. A champagne glass clinked softly in the distance. Alexander leaned toward his agent. "This should be amusing." The old man sat on the bench, adjusting his position slightly. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling almost imperceptibly. Not from nervousness, Alexander assumed. From age, from lack of skill, from the weight of attempting something beyond his ability. Then the first note sounded. Clear, pure, perfectly struck. The second note followed, then a third, forming the beginning of a melody. Not show music, not a classical piece designed to impress. Something simpler, a lullaby, soft and aching with emotion that seemed to fill every corner of the vast lobby. The crowd stilled completely. The melody continued, each note placed with deliberate care, the phrasing gentle but precise. The old man's eyes closed, his face relaxing into an expression of deep memory. His fingers, weathered and spotted with age, moved across the keys with surprising fluidity. No flash, no speed, no technical showing off. Just pure, honest music that carried weight beyond its simplicity. A woman near the windows brought her hand to her chest. Another guest's eyes glistened. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" The melody shifted, adding subtle complexity, revealing layers beneath the simple surface. The harmonies spoke of longing, of distance, of something beautiful lost and remembered. Alexander's smile faded, his arms uncrossed. His agent beside him stood frozen, her expression stunned. The music continued for 2 minutes that felt suspended in time, each phrase building emotional weight until the final notes hung in the air like morning mist. The old man's hands lifted from the keys gently. Silence followed, the kind of silence that feels sacred. Then, almost hesitantly, someone began clapping. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire lobby erupted in applause, not polite golf claps. Real, moved, enthusiastic applause. Several people wiped their eyes. The elderly valet stood slowly, his expression unchanged. No smile, no acknowledgement of the applause. He simply nodded once to the crowd and began walking back toward his valet station. Alexander stood paralyzed. His mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. That wasn't amateur playing. That wasn't accidental competence. That was mastery, restrained and genuine. Before he could stop himself, he called out, "Wait!" The old man paused, turning back slightly. "Who are you?" Alexander's voice came out quieter than intended, stripped of its earlier arrogance. The valet hesitated, then spoke in a voice barely loud enough to carry. "My name is Thomas Nguyen. I taught piano at the Boston Conservatory for 23 years before I retired." The lobby went dead silent. Alexander felt the floor shift beneath him. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Boston Conservatory?" Another voice said, "That's one of the top music schools in the country," Thomas continued, his tone still calm, still unbothered. "I came to this country with my family in 1975 after the war. I worked 3 jobs while finishing my degree. I taught students who went on to play with major orchestras. I retired 5 years ago. My wife passed away 2 years ago. I took this job because I like being around people, around life. The pay helps my daughter. The work gives me purpose." He paused, looking directly at Alexander. "I gave up performing decades ago. I played just now because you mentioned my daughter. Music was never about showing off for me. It was about connection, about memory, about the things we carry that don't need an audience." Alexander's face drained of color. His carefully constructed persona cracked. Around him, guests stared, their expressions ranging from shock to disapproval. Phones captured every second. His agent touched his arm, whispering urgently, "Alexander, this is live on someone's Instagram. 12,000 people are watching." One of the wedding guests, an older woman in an elegant navy gown, stepped forward. Her voice cut clear and sharp. "Mr. Vaughn, I'm Patricia Chen, mother of the bride. I specifically hired you because of your reputation. But what I just witnessed was cruelty, not artistry." Another guest added, "You tried to humiliate that man in front of everyone." Alexander tried to respond. It was a challenge, not..." "It was arrogance," Patricia interrupted. "And now everyone here has seen it." Thomas had returned to his valet station, tying his apron back on with steady hands. He resumed organizing keys like nothing unusual had happened. A few guests approached him, speaking quietly, offering words that looked like apologies on his behalf and gratitude. One older gentleman shook his hand firmly. Alexander stood alone near the piano, his performance scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Once, twice, 5 times. Text messages from his publicist, his manager, colleagues. The video was spreading, fast. Patricia Chen walked over to Thomas's station. Alexander watched from a distance as she spoke to the elderly man. Thomas shook his head politely, gesturing as if to say it wasn't necessary. Patricia insisted, her hand on his arm, her expression earnest. Finally, Thomas nodded slowly. Patricia returned to the center of the lobby, addressing the gathered guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to make an announcement. Mr. Nguyen has graciously agreed to play one piece during our reception tonight. The piece he just played was a Vietnamese lullaby his mother sang to him as a child. I think we'd all be honored to hear him play again." Applause erupted again. Thomas looked uncomfortable but nodded in acknowledgement, a small, humble dip of his head. Alexander's agent pulled him aside. "We need to leave, now. This is a disaster." "I'm supposed to perform," Alexander said weakly. "Not anymore," she replied, showing him her phone. "Patricia Chen's assistant just emailed. Your contract is terminated. They'll pay the cancellation fee, but they don't want you here." The words hit like cold water. Alexander looked around the lobby. Guests avoided his eyes. A few whispered while glancing his way. The elegant space that had felt like his stage now felt like a courtroom. He grabbed his coat and portfolio, his hands shaking slightly. As he walked toward the exit, he passed Thomas's valet station. The old man was helping a couple with their car ticket, his manner polite and efficient. He glanced up briefly as Alexander passed. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a look that said he'd seen this before, this moment when pride crumbles, and he felt no joy in witnessing it. Alexander pushed through the revolving doors into the Manhattan evening. The city noise hit him, car horns and distant sirens and the hum of countless lives continuing on, indifferent to his humiliation. His phone buzzed continuously. Social media notifications, news outlets requesting comment, fellow musicians sharing the video with commentary ranging from disappointment to scathing criticism. Inside, the wedding reception would continue. Thomas would play his lullaby again, and people would cry, moved by its honest simplicity. They would remember the elderly valet who carried mastery with humility, who chose connection over performance, who never needed to announce his worth because it lived quietly in every note he played. 3 days later, the video had been viewed 47 million times across platforms. Not because of Alexander's cruelty, though that was the hook, because of the 60 seconds of Thomas playing, his weathered hands creating something that reminded people what music was supposed to do. Touch the soul, bridge distance, carry memory. Alexander issued a public apology. It was careful, written by his publicist, hitting all the right notes of remorse. But the damage was done. 3 scheduled performances were canceled. A recording contract negotiation stalled indefinitely. His social media comments filled with people sharing their own stories of underestimated elders, of immigrant parents who sacrificed everything, of the difference between technical skill and true artistry. Thomas Nguyen returned to his valet job at the Grand Meridian Hotel. He declined multiple interview requests, offers to perform, and even a late-night talk show appearance. He told the hotel manager he appreciated the interest but preferred to keep his life simple. He had his work, his daughter, his memories. That was enough. The piano in the lobby became something of a landmark. Guests asked about it, about the story. The hotel placed a small plaque nearby, not announcing anything grand, just noting that the instrument had been played by many talented individuals over the years. Those who knew, knew. And sometimes, late at night when his shift ended and the lobby was nearly empty, Thomas would sit at that piano for just a moment. He'd play a few bars of his mother's lullaby, letting the notes settle into the quiet space. Then he'd stand, straighten his uniform, and walk out into the Manhattan night, carrying his music where it had always lived, in the silence, in the heart, in the places too sacred for applause. If this story moved you, don't scroll past. There are more moments where humility defeats arrogance and quiet strength speaks louder than performance. Subscribe now and catch the next chapter the moment it drops.